is the new black. And this evening, we're actually going to be covering quite a few things. The whole purpose of this is so that we can really bring more attention to the impact of climate change and environmental injustice that it has on communities of color. And we've been able to see that throughout time, a lot of this has been able to create, over generations, different diseases, asthma, different rare cancers, etc. And we're going to cover some of those points, as well as even going a little bit to maybe how we are able to change these things. So, without further ado, we can actually go ahead and roll that real quick.
Sound is up on here. Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
All right, and welcome back, everybody. So we're actually going to start out, we're going to introduce our panel. We have several wonderful people here. Maybe just kind of go around. Maybe just introduce yourself real quick.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Adewale Ogunbadejo, and I am the Workforce Development Manager for Grid Alternatives, Greater Los Angeles. We're an affiliate of an organization that's based in the Bay Area, and I'll get into who we are a little later, but it's great to be here. I'm here with my beautiful wife and my son over there in the corner. Newborn, 3 months.
Hi everyone, my name is Marcel Watts. I am a senior business advisor for CDC Small Business Finance, and what we do is provide financing to small business owners, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but particularly we have a program called the NERD Project area.
Thank you. My name is Sir S.I.R. Bailey, and I'm an educator, humanities facilitator at Free LA High School. Free LA High School is a part of the Youth Justice Coalition in Los Angeles. Thanks for having me.
My name is Adis. I am a cultural producer and community organizer in Los Angeles, California.
And my name is Michael Jones. I run the company California Image Advisors. We're sponsoring this panel for this evening. And our mission is to have as many property owners go green as possible without paying out of their pocket, and also build up the value of their property, because we do feel that this is one of the ways that we'll be able to help fight gentrification in the long run. All right, so I want to actually just start out with the other sound here.
No sound yet.
Okay, so I wanted to actually start off then with maybe the first question. There's a video that we actually end up rolling in a minute. But one of the things that we wanted to kind of touch on was how the lack of generational wealth exists, and how that does affect not only as far as social injustice is concerned, but also environmental injustice. Because of the lack of generational wealth or resources within our community. You might want to maybe talk about that. Sure. The question is, how has generational wealth, or how is generational wealth really tied to environmental or social injustice?
Well, that's an issue that we're trying to address right now at CDC Small Business Finance. We're trying to make sure that we include the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous people of color, just having an impact, access to capital can have an impact on your life because it can turn your life completely around just by having money to fund and operate your business, which means your family, your lifestyle, your home, your whole living altogether. And that's just something we're trying to address with making sure that we impact the community, that we're mission-based, a nonprofit organization, and that's our mission is to give back and support the communities that are in need.
I love that myself. I would say when we at Free LA and Youth Justice Coalition, we recognize, the disparity in generational wealth, the monetary sort of wealth being passed down, and that impact. Just as vital, we work with
because it's really important for the next video.
And that wealth has also been stolen from us systematically. And it's that wealth also that makes it very difficult to build in our communities. The wealth of our experience, the wealth of our love, as we are disproportionately incarcerated or killed by police. We have that monetary wealth that we're lacking, but then even the wealth of our character is being put under attack. And that's what we continue to uplift, like you were doing, that part of our life.
Would you like to speak to this, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to that, kind of what people are saying, I think from where I see it in the work that we do, dealing with environmental injustice, I guess you could say, what they call usually low-income communities or underserved communities always happen to be communities of color. And I think that's directly related to the lack of generational wealth, but I think if we look at it like from a historical standpoint, we've always been pushed into these pockets. And if you look at it environmentally, we're closer to trucking corridors, we're closer to power plants, where all these particulate matters and pollutants are in the air, and we suffer from higher rates of, asthma, which you said earlier. We have different types of cancers that are not normal. We're near all these different kind of factories where there's lead poisoning and, all these different things that ultimately not only keep us
if you can't get the sound on that one, then let's go ahead and jump to the next
but
one.
in the long term really impacts our health in major ways.
So, to continue that line of questioning is echo what you were talking about. One of the communities that comes to mind directly
So that doesn't
is
mean
Flint,
just because we
Michigan.
can't hear it,
Right,
that
so
doesn't mean that
I
it's
think
not
it's up
gonna
until
hear
now
heard
that
through
we
this.
still haven't had clean water
Because I just
over
heard the
7
sound when we were
years.
just playing.
How do you think that their lack of access or resources made it
Okay. If
so
we
that
can't
they
hear that one, then
cannot
it's not going to work.
advocate
So
for
scratch that
themselves in
one.
this way? And why do you think that the
just
rest
go
of
to
the
the one for
world
the link.
hasn't
So you just
stepped
want to
up
go to the
when it
link?
came to
Yeah, because
Flint?
this one right here, this was I going just to. heard it playing. We have to hear it on stage. We can't. But hear then, it. okay, I'm just gonna go to the link, bro. Okay.
For me, I feel like the world has to made it known. There's over, I forget the number, but there was a LA Times article about how many cities in Los Angeles County and definitely up and down the coast of California have just as bad water as what it was talking about. And
Just as bad?
Just as bad.
Just as bad as Flint, Michigan, and California. Can you imagine
Yeah. And sadly, like even in some of the historic first black towns like Allensworth, that particularly comes to mind. I remember that name being on it. It's something that affects us all, I think, in our selfishness and in terms of resources and lack of stewardship. And we feel it the most, but what we're doing at Free LA and just exploring where we are as an educator, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and how some of the initiatives or priority points of the Poor People's Campaign or the Black Panther Party, how do those social organizing principles impact how we take care of the environment? Because we are the ultimate stewards. And even when it comes to legislation and going to the courts and saying this is what we want, or not buying from companies that are polluting our world.
Marcel?
So I'm not quite sure why that water supply has been going on so long. And I do understand that different communities
Gonna roll that one in.
and multiple
Drops off in three, in about three more seconds. We're gonna roll that one, the one that's just the link.
Communities that have higher income. For instance, I just recently moved from Woodland Hills to North Hollywood, and now I hear a train track. And also my Wi-Fi is very slow, and I called to switch Wi-Fi companies, and AT&T came out and they said, it's gonna be slow no matter what. There are no towers around here. So I was like, why? I thought towers were everywhere for Wi-Fi. So here's my Wi-Fi access. And also my Wi-Fi at home. Like the lack of those kind of resources is impacting me. Then I hear the train, and I didn't even see the train. I don't know, it's not that close to the coast. So noise pollution, all of those things are impacting the lower income communities. But I will add, CDC Small Business Finance, we just launched a pilot program, and we're trying to target getting access to capital to people of color in these communities. And we just launched in LA, but we also launched in Detroit. So we're trying to get the people in Detroit. I know it's not Flint, but it's initiative, access to capital, resources, funding to help grow the businesses. So we understand that a lack of resources, a lack of funding can keep you down, and not help you grow your business, your family, your life, everything. It has an impact on everything. So we're trying to do that across the nation, from LA to Detroit to the DMV area.
Mike, I want you there's a part of this that I'm starting to hear that it seems like this is kind of common, right? Where lower income communities are the ones that are getting the most impacted by climate issues. Would you say that this is a systematic effort to marginalize these communities, or are we just being forgotten in the grand scheme of things?
I would definitely have to say the marginalization is pretty much, when you really do the research, it really is by plan. One of the things that you'll find is that, and I'll be able to show this in a moment, just like Adewale and everyone was saying, whenever it comes to the location of any type of a toxic waste center, or the oil fields, they're always placed within our neighborhoods, no doubt, and that's done strategically, okay? Because first of all, let's just go back to, early 1900s, somebody discovers an oil field. Nobody lives in that area, so they pump oil out of that for the next 50, 60, 70 years. But during that time, they make sure that it is not normally your white upper class that are moving into that area. Therefore, through urban planning, this does happen over decades. One of the other things that does happen is, and I'm sure that, Marcel can speak to this, is that if you go back to, I think it was the early 1940s, 1942, I believe to be exact, when they had created the Social Security system, okay? African Americans were not able to have access to that until 20 years later, 1962, okay? When you also take a look at the whole real estate situation, where each of the 50 states had made it to where realtors could not sell to African Americans, to black, to indigenous peoples. This was a state law, okay? And a lot of these things, even just a couple of years ago, I forgot where it was, but some places just ending their sunset clause, which is where if you were a black person caught after sunset at night, not only could you be jailed, you could be killed and so forth. I forgot what state it is, but they just finally expired that law just 2-3 years ago, okay? So that kind of tells you right there. But the main thing that I do see happening is there are a lot of different government-sponsored programs that are out there that can actually, help change a lot of things, and that's been my job, to help educate property owners. Because the main thing is being able to move away from what we have, this toxic waste environment that we have, and we can start transitioning that now by doing very light things. Yes, going green, solar, and just many other different energy efficient things that we can do at no cost to us. And at the same time, when we make those upgrades to our properties, be they commercial or residential, it increases the value of that property immediately. Because you have to look at the fact that You have more wildfires, and the wildfires put like 2 million people, not only out of their homes but without power for like 3 to 4 to 6 weeks in Northern California. Texas, with this past winter, okay, 4 million people without power for weeks, okay? This is mainly because the infrastructure within each of the 50 states is over 128 years old. So it wasn't built for our 21st century devices. So with that being the case, that means that they're only going to focus mainly on the areas of the infrastructure that are pulling in the most money for them. That's not communities of color. Or black communities. Yeah.
If I may, and that's why I go back to the wealth of our heritage, right? We are the second farmers of this nation after our Native American brothers and sisters. So we got here through the war for other sons, but we've always grown. And Ron Finley says if you grow food, it's like growing your own money. But what he ran into was legislation saying you can't use this part of the property even though you're responsible for it. But there's countless vacant lots. And so the youth, looking at the social issues of incarceration, this history that we're talking about, continue, and with community, continue to advocate for space, right? Because the Constitution said you have the right to life, liberty. It wasn't first the pursuit of happiness. It was property, a place to be. So like Amanda Gorman said, everyone would have their own line and victory when Michael flowing forward.
Yeah, I think that the key word in there too is property, because that really is more of the mantra of America, because it's a capitalistic society, you know. And just to kind of give you an idea, do you have that ready? To give you an idea of how this is affecting us right here in our own neighborhoods. I'm going to go ahead and roll this clip, and you'll be able to see. This is from Stand LA, and they've done what's called the virtual toxic tour. And here, I'll just scroll through it. Start scrolling up and up. So here, basically, you'll be able to see exactly where they have not only all the oil fields, but the waste, the landfills, and so forth. All of these are right here in our community. Can you scroll down for us? Just scroll down. There you go. Okay, and if you can go over to, okay. And so here you can see all the different oil fields. Like if you click onto the one that says Wilmington.
Wilmington.
Yeah, right there.
Third one.
Third one.
The line of words.
Right there. Okay, so when this comes up, okay, so what you'll be able to see here when this map comes up, every single one of those dots on there are oil fields. That's Wilmington, okay? Wilmington, a very small part of Los Angeles. That's how many oil fields exist there in the neighborhood. Those oil fields, as they are producing oil, and over time they deplete, they become much, much more toxic. They leave what's called PCBs within the ground. PCBs is any time when there's a gas station, the underground tanks, the type of poison and toxins that it emits is PCBs and several others, okay? That's what we're breathing in every day. That's just from the oil fields in our neighborhood. You can scroll down some more. Okay, so here, and actually everyone will have access to this, it's on our Instagram, but basically, if you go over to Murphy Oilfield. Okay, and here, scroll down a little bit more, but here, basically, this starts to cover the oil fields that exist within Inglewood. Okay, you can scroll down some more. But basically what you'll find is that in Inglewood, you're looking at pretty much the same amount of oil fields that are there, because I'm sure that you guys have driven up, not Stalker, but towards Baldwin Hills, right, and the Los Angeles oil field that's there, okay? Right in your backyard. You know, so you have to really think, you know, if in Flint they have water that's rusted and catches on fire when you drink it, here in California, with all the stuff that we're breathing in right now, we're just as combustible. You know, so I can go on and on, but pretty much you kind of get the idea that this is what we are living and breathing every single day, and we don't even think about it.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's actually very informative. Like you all said, we pass by those things every single day, and we have no idea. I want to skip ahead, but I also want to get back to something that you said, Sir Bailey, when you said we were the original growers, right? That's something that we did. And I think back in like the Booker T times of American history, we saw a lot of this push towards apprenticeship and skill learning and things of that nature. So now that we're fast forward and we're in 2021, what would you say are, and this is like I guess a question for the whole panel, what are some obstacles of entry in the green industry as it relates to not only just the youth and members of our community, but also how can it serve as a pathway for the formerly incarcerated people to re-enter back into society? And we can start with you, Sir Bailey Adewale, if you want to continue and go on.
Well, certainly, since you said the green industry, I'm going to go ahead. 2 days ago, 420, big up to Cat Packer and people that are cage-free cannabis on the front lines of social equity when it comes to that small part of agriculture in California. Agriculture is California's biggest commodity. That's our biggest export. And of agriculture, it is hemp, marijuana, that's the biggest of that. And so, looking at the demographics, those zip codes that were most heavily impacted by the war on drugs, this draconian minimum 15-year sentence, no matter how much it is, those communities should and are being given advantages in terms of the cost for the license, but we need to know about it. We're not necessarily, and that comes back to the stigma and the wealth of our heritage in validating ourselves and our families of what is medicinal and how to be safe with it.
Thank you very much. Adewale, do you think you could add some additional points to that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. As I'm thinking about everything, it's also intertwined. Because if you look at the history of this country and, the institution of slavery and then coming out of slavery and rolling into Jim Crow and then from Jim Crow into mass incarceration, all this stuff is how we got here in the first place. It's how we were put in these neighborhoods that were concentrations of, all these oil fields and everything with redlining and, the white folks got the Homestead Act to come out here and develop the West, and they were given the loans by the banks and we weren't. And then there was, the whole cities and everything were cut up in certain ways to say you could live below or above, this train track, but don't, like you said, Sunset, don't be on this side of the train track. So all that, and then lack of opportunity and access is what drove us into incarceration. Most of the crimes that we commit a lot of times are crimes of opportunity, or at least what we perceive to be opportunity. End up doing 20, 30 years, like you said, with the mandatory minimums and the war on drugs, which has been destroying us for generations, and we need to really figure that out, because we can't afford to continue to lose our youth, which is our future. They lock especially black males up in our prime years, so you're leaving at 16, 17 years old. You're not coming back home till you're 40, 50. And we work with individuals like this at Grid Alternatives all the time. They've been locked up for 20 years, 30 years.
Could you speak more and explain to the community what is Grid Alternatives and a little bit more about the activism and the way that you reach people in the community?
Definitely. So Grid Alternatives is the nation's largest solar nonprofit. And we were started in 2001 was when it was conceptualized. But 2004 is when the organization launched in the Bay Area by two professional engineers, both white and European, but their hearts were in a very good place. They saw that solar technology worked, but what they did also see was that what's happened historically, communities that typically were locked out, it was going to be the same thing with the solar industry. So they said, how can we get this technology to communities of concern? And we're trying to learn how to deal with the right terms. We got to stop calling it disadvantage and low income and all those different things. I heard something about stigma.
Kind of jump around here on the order,
but anyway,
this one next.
so they came with this concept. They started
That's
installing
the
solar
Ocasio-Cortez
Yeah.
one?
quote unquote low income families, income qualified families in the residential
That's-
sector.
that's
Here in
this one,
LA,
right?
we've done
Yeah.
I think over 2,000 homes. We've also done affordable housing projects. We do it with mission-aligned nonprofits so that they can use those savings to continue to run their organization. But as time went on, we began to delve into the workforce development aspect of it. Around 2010, the solar industry started to have a resurgence because they say Jimmy Carter put solar on the White House back in the day, and then Republicans came and shut it down. But it's had a resurgence, and California is really like number one when it comes to solar and renewable energy, and it's largely because of the policies and the legislation that's in place. So Grid Alternatives in 2006, 2007, there was a rebate program called the California Solar Initiative. There was a carve out for low-income families that 10% should go to communities, that were income qualified. And at the time, Grid was the only organization that was doing this kind of work. So we became the program administrators to install solar for families in underserved communities. And that allowed us to grow from Oakland to 7 offices in California, from San Diego all the way up to Oakland. Then we went national, opened an office in DC, opened one in Colorado, and then we went international, doing some work in Nicaragua as well as Nepal and Mexico. I'm pushing for Grid Africa, of course. I'm pushing for Grid Africa. But as the workforce development program grew out, first of all, the opportunity on the table is the environmental aspect of really moving away from fossil fuels and everything is great. It needs to be done. You see the health impacts it's having on us. But the world already understands that we have to make this transition. It's only here that, we're playing games, or at least they're playing games with it, and they don't want us to see it. They need to figure out how to control it before everybody can get in. Because what it does is decentralize power. When you're able to go put a solar system on your home and throw some batteries on your home, you don't need the utility anymore. So it's a loss of, their power is decentralized in many ways, Even if you listen to what President Biden is talking about with this $2 trillion energy infrastructure package, well, a lot of that's going to go towards clean energy. It's going towards electric vehicle charging, so that they can deploy these electric vehicles. It's going towards solar. It's going towards energy storage. So there's millions and millions of dollars that are being invested here, right here in the country, especially in California, who's been a leader. So that means there's a lot of job opportunity, And they're saying that this is the largest, I think, economic opportunity since World War II or something, right? In terms of the amount of investments that's about to take place. And our communities have to be ready. We cannot miss out. It's kind of like when the .com era and the computers. And you have people like Mark Cuban who became billionaires overnight because if you looked at what was going on at that time in our schools, in their schools they had Macs, the precursor to Apple. In our schools we had old IBMs that were out 10 years before. So we couldn't keep up and compete by the time the market hit. And if we're not ready for this green revolution, the same thing's gonna happen. So we have a chance to work with individuals that are formerly incarcerated, get them trained up, and move them into the industry. And I think it's such a powerful narrative. We partner with organizations like Homeboy Industries, and down in on the corner of Watson and Compton, over Shields for Families. you know. So it's really transformational. I've seen individuals that have been lifers come out working in solar. They have a career now, you know. Young brothers, sisters, as long as they put the time in, there's an opportunity there, you know. So yeah.
Thank you, and I actually want to extend that piece to Marcel, especially as it relates to, you know, being sort of new to this type of income generating business as an independent contractor or anything like that. How does that translate into the world of PPP loans and starting your own business and the idea of wealth generation for people who might not be used to it?
Yes, I actually want to comment on what these two gentlemen said.
Sure.
I think that it's a lack of education and really knowledge about this solar. I recently purchased a home, and I had some solar consultants come out to try to get solar panels, but when they talk to me, I'm still skeptical. Like, is this really good, or sell my house, or if I move? So I really don't know much about it. I know that it should save me money, and he's throwing out numbers, and I'm like, is it really telling the truth? Like, when they're really going to be $50 versus 150? So it's education, and it's a lack of resources and information. And for myself, I mean, I'm doing the research, but I really don't have anybody that I just have. There's nobody around me that's saying, yeah, make sure you go get your house solar panels, make sure you do that. And I just did it on my own. I took my own initiative, but I still was very skeptical. So I think that education and really getting the word out. And then two, for the medical marijuana industry, I had a couple clients that were trying to get into that industry, and I was connecting them with the council members and the assembly members just to get licensing and permits required. But we don't fund those type of businesses, and others, they gather together and put their funds together and open up these dispensaries.
Another trend.
So
instead of going to roll this one, the last one that we have on there.
Access to money. Because these industries are making tons of money, and it's just
Can't
going crazy. Millionaires.
You can't tell whether it's just being read.
But
It should
we're
be.
not getting access to that because we don't have friends that can just invest and say, here's $100,000 or $1 million to start this dispensary. So it's always information,
See a thumbnail.
resources, and
Okay,
access
so that's
to
okay. So not that one.
prevents everything from
It's the
happening.
next one. No.
And so
Keep going.
to answer your other question.
That one.
PPP and access to PPP and all of the SBA funding, again, the Hispanic and the Black community was left out because one, they didn't believe, like I don't believe in I'm not sure about solar. No one was going to them saying, here's the information, here's PPP, this is how you apply. They didn't realize it was a forgivable loan, so they were even more. And then the second round came and all these people found out about it and they applied. But the first round, if it wasn't a second round of PPP, a lot of people would have missed out. I just had someone today say they would have had to close if it weren't for PPP. So it's always information, getting the word out, and we're skeptical, I can admit, but we have to have more trust and we have to get the word out. Like all of this knowledge, all of you guys' knowledge, people aren't receptive of it because it's not enough information out there. We're not all talking about it. So we all need to be talking about the same thing that's beneficial to our community.
Mike, I actually wanted to ask you a question to echo that. So one of the things that I kind of heard earlier from you, Sir Bailey, and then now is that although we are the stewards of this planet, but it doesn't seem like outside of just having lack of resources, it doesn't seem like our community is especially interested in climate change. Can you speak to that when you're going to the different homes and canvassing and trying to get what really is an opportunity in the hands of Black homeowners and what your experience has been?
So you said I'm talking about this. First of all, the way that I see it is by educating people, just as what I was speaking about. And I know there's another thing too that Adewale does with Grid Alternatives, because they actually, he can speak more to this, obviously, because I can't, but basically training people for free how to install solar and pretty much everything, along the line. So that education is going out there. It's a complete, nonprofit volunteer, system, which has been working beautifully. The way that I approach it, because I'm for profit, so when I'm speaking to property owners, that's what I have to focus on with them. So to explain that to you, I'm gonna go ahead and roll this one, if you could.
Rolando, our audience member, do you have any questions that we want to address while we're here?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm actually in the process of starting my own solar company. Mainly because the issue that I saw was having a mathematics background and just seeing how that works. The many mouths you have to feed before the homeowner actually gets to purchase the solar panel. So, I'm from Argentina under the DACA program, and I'm trying to get this business started and the original capital to give me that push. I was told about Relay actually today, so just wanted to get more informed maybe after this call.
Okay, no, we can, I'm sure somebody might have a similar question. So once this video is over, maybe I will kind of speak to a little bit about that, especially from the international perspective, and then also surveillance.
And I needed my part. I think there was a couple of things I was hearing that I want to kind of touch on a bit more. I think the training piece, also saying about the education,
It's a very interesting hybrid, half online, half in person sort of thing. So I appreciate you as well.
This is the answer to your question.
So they're hearing it.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah. So on this one, and this will answer your question as well. So this client here, first of all, before she she okay. So with this particular client here, she actually lives right down the street on Degnan in Coliseum. Okay, retired school teacher. And basically, with Cheryl Lynn, she was really hesitant about going solar, didn't know anything about it and all that stuff, right? And so I ended up being able to capture her as a client. The thing that she was concerned about is how much does it cost? Number one question, okay? So what I do is I focus on programs where the homeowner, the property owner, can actually go solar without a penny out of their pocket, receive tax incentives, rebates, lifetime warranties, which can be from 25 years up to 50 years, depending upon which products we're putting on their home, as well as being able to increase the value of their home. So with her, before we had started on her home was valued at $683,000. We went ahead and put solar on it, energy efficient windows, energy efficient paint, which lasts for 50 years, 50, so she won't have to paint her house for 50 years. Yeah, that's a lifetime warranty on it for 50 years. Also, basically, when we put the roof on as well, with the roof, it was the same thing. It was basically there's a 50-year warranty on it, and she won't have to paint her house for that 50 years. Change the roof for the 50 years, and most people normally have to change their roof every 12, 15 years. But the bottom line to it is that her house was valued at $683,000 before we did the work. After we finished the work, the house jumped up to $925,000 within less than 90 days. Okay, that's normally what I hear, sign me up. So that's what that video was talking about, because it's showing, first of all, people are most interested in what's in it for me, how much will I make? And because they are focused more on the profit, that's really where I come from, and because these programs exist where they can do it without any cost out of their pocket. Now, once all that's done, now they can start to listen to why it's important. because they see it reflected in their bill. Their bill has normally gone from, $200 or $400 a month electricity down to zero for the electricity part. The value of the home's gone up. With this lady here, Cheryl Lynn, after we got the value of the house up $263,000, she put $54,000 cash of that back in her pocket, as well as 30% tax breaks, as well as receiving about $1,600 back from her utility company. So all these things play together, and the homeowner, all they have to do is really just sit back, sign off on it, and we go to work from there. And we constantly keep checking up on them because we're really looking to build relationships. And in a sense, kind of like what Adewale is doing with his company, is we are building more of an educational aspect of it too, because we're actually opening up that online as far as teachable for anyone that's considering not only solar, but anything that's energy efficient, and really plugging in extremely why that is important, because if you look at what happened in Texas and wildfires and all that, you have to put it all together. This is not a sales game. This is a reality, and there's no choice. People have to go in this direction. And in the meantime, a lot of people, we have to make a lot of money, but at the same time, it's something that can rebuild our community, not only from ground up, but also from character up. Because if we're going in there and using this as a vehicle to help curtail mass incarceration, we're killing two birds with one stone.
Still on? Oh, no problem. Yeah, I totally agree, Michael. I think the industry is a strange thing because there's definitely some crooks out there. Maybe a decade ago or less, they were selling solar at $8 a watt, and now solar's like you can probably get it $2.50 to $3 a watt. And I think there's a history of black families being in communities and outsiders coming in and saying, "I got this great deal for you," and buying houses for pennies on the dollar. Gentrification essentially, which is going on in our communities now. So we're very skeptical of people coming in and tell us they have things for us. We don't know what it is, but that education piece is so important to know, what solar is and know what all these clean technologies are and urban farming and, how we can go back to taking care of our own communities. And I think that, thinking about what you were saying earlier, Marcel, with the PPP, and all those streams of funding. I worked with, some brothers that have started their own solar companies, but they also have been individuals that were formerly incarcerated. So when it's time for them to go get money, they can't get it because these systemic barriers are there, So the brother couldn't access the PPP, So how do we promote entrepreneurship, and how do we find these workarounds that have been instituted to keep us out playing these kind of opportunities like we should.
Really? Yeah.
Resist the temptation to fragment. We're blessed with this whole problem, this holy problem. And it was Ecclesiastes 10:18 says, by sloth the house roof drips, by not taking care, and that's not us. That's not our personality. That's not our character as people of color. But that stigma is placed on as a byproduct of the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow, everything that you shared, and breaking up our families and having a different value than the time that it takes to grow, than it does to go get a job for somebody else. And so, but we're breaking it. These conversations, doing these things, it's a mighty, mighty work, because my brother Rolando, that's in the audience, I know he was coming. We were trying to meet up this weekend to go see his farm, right? I'm leaving, but he, as a graffiti writer, did a tag on my son Yaya's first video, some years ago. So I'll bring it all around because, we're pieces of a masterpiece. And once we all get it together, right, and that's happening. So yeah, Kairos moment.
So I would just add, I am on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council at my job, and one of our goals is to change the
the scoring model to get financing. We use the SBA standards for our loans and the requirements to qualify for a loan. And so some of those things that disqualify you, for instance, a record or bankruptcies, late payments in the last 2 or 3 years, and since COVID, it's been bankruptcies for the last 10 years. So we actually want to go out into the community and speak to people and see how can we better serve the community and get over those barriers that might be credit issues or incarceration records or things of that nature that a lot of people don't want to deal with. So it's good to, hear this. It's something I can take back to the council and say, this is what I hear in the community, and these are the things that we have good, hardworking people with businesses, entrepreneurs, but they can't take it to the next level because they can't get financing. So they're limited to what they can do as far as being an entrepreneur. They can't grow, basically.
So are these rules, and this is just now I'm curious, are these rules something that are predetermined by federal and state governments or individual loan third parties like CDC?
So most of our loan products are SBA backed, so we have to follow their guidelines, but we can get additional programs that are not SBA funded programs where we can make up our own rules and guidelines for underwriting. So, but if we don't know what's out there, if we don't know these issues and these are challenges for our borrowers, we still can't address this issue. So that's something we're trying to address and understand better in the community. I'm not an underwriter, so I don't know what they see when someone gets declined or turned down, but I see it, but I don't see all of it, you know what I mean? So that's something that's just good to hear, that these are challenges and you have people that are hardworking and want to grow, but just can't get it to the next level because of lack of financing.
Very interesting. So, to continue on with the conversation, I wanted to know, and then this is also that goes to Mike Adewale, you, Sir Bailey, what is the typical demographic of the people that you see who typically come for these jobs or when you're contracting work or whatever the case may be? And then also, Sir Bailey, from your perspective, who works with the youth, what do you think is the general attitude towards science, STEM, things like that, and how can we foster a sense of excitement when it comes to nature, ecology, and climate change, or climate justice, I should say. So if we start with that question and then moving on to the demographics.
I think they're very excited because their game is needing to bring the fun parts of STEM into our communities that aren't necessarily always there. The capacity to drone, but the aptitude and the interest is certainly there from students. We connect them into the analytical parts of algebra and math based on, for example, in 2018, over 1,300 expungements happened at YJC. 1,300 years of time reduced.
Oh, wow.
1,300 years of time reduced. And again, just as that synergy of conversation, I want to plane ride and get introduced to someone who has a immigration case. I tell him who I'm working with. He says, YJC, he had a lifetime sentence, but was able to get out, and now is in jeopardy from ICE. He said, YJC, I heard of you guys. That's the organization that passed laws, and that's why I'm out now. And so students that have that buy-in, that because now recognizing that a food desert is also the same social injustice, and that food desert impacts the climate. Greta Thunberg in her book says a lot of people are talking about hope. We need more action, because action will bring hope. When I read that line in her book, I said that takes me to Corinthians 13, faith, hope, and love, because faith without works is dead. But as you work it, then you see more hope, and that work is what we're doing here again, and taking it to our communities. Now young people will join their neighborhood councils, and then parents who own the homes won't be so, because it's not our fault, right? Carter G. Woodson said there's a miseducation of the Negro, and Lauryn Hill repeated it. And so we have to break out of how we're schooled while we're in school, as James Baldwin would say, right? The paradox of education is that when you get educated, you see you have to break it down. We're breaking it down right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think demographics wise, we're focused on communities of color and, again, underserved communities, what you typically find, but, we work primarily with Black and brown, I say probably maybe 60% Latino, 20-30% African American and Black. Then we work with Asian, Pacific Islanders, kind of South, a lot of Southeast Asians, all these people who have been marginalized.
Do you see women in these programs?
Great question. So we have had and still have a Women in Solar initiative because the solar industry is in part a construction industry, and what we know about the construction industry typically is that historically it's always been male driven, and times are changing, there's women out there that can get out there and do the work too. But just like we talked about education and everything earlier, we have to let them know that, hey, we're encouraging this over here. One thing that I can really commend Grid Alternatives for, and I've been with the organization since 2010. I started as a volunteer, but I've never been with an organization like this that's so focused on equity, inclusion, and diversity, and they actually live it, and they're studying it, and they're figuring out what can they do, to do their part in making things more just. So they focused on women in solar, and they have not just women installers, but women in leadership, and they look at, what does our organization look like? Does our organization reflect the communities that we serve? Because if not, then we're not doing what we need to do. How are we going about hiring? Do we have those same barriers that you were talking about when we're talking about who we're going to hire into our company? Is an individual with a record a problem? Well, we need to take a look at that, right? We need to take a look at that, understanding the systemic oppression that's went on. I've met individuals that have records, and they're the hardest working individuals I meet. That's just the truth of it. So we have a Women in Solar initiative. We have a focus on those that have been formerly incarcerated. I'm talking about cannabis. They have what's called Prop 64. It came out a couple of years ago, right? And Prop 64 is billions of dollars. I think it's $7-8 billion every year that's released for different things. And we applied for it in partnership with Homewood Industries. They gave us, considerable amount of money to train individuals who have been impacted by the war on drugs. Cannabis is amazing. When they legalized it, Colorado sold out of weed in the first day. Well, that means they were growing a lot of weed when it was illegal. Nobody was locking the white boys up. Excuse my language. Nobody was locking them up. And they sold out of weed the first day. They made billions of dollars. So we should have access to it. As long as we've been getting locked up all over the country for selling marijuana, nickel bags. So we need to make sure that there's some equity in this piece, and it has to be very consciously and intentfully thought about. And I think Grid Alternatives has been successful, and I think is a model for looking at what a just transition in anything looks like. Your board has to be reflective of your community. Your staff has to be reflective of the community. The people that you're serving has to be, reflective of the community. And you really have to take a holistic approach to dealing with individuals. I can't just train you and say you're ready for a job. There's other things that we have to address, like trauma-informed care. Other barriers that we have to break down, and dealing with financial literacy. So you can send out a complete person that not only do they get the job, but they keep the job. So, yeah.
Speak on that too. Kind of like the other side of that is the approach that I've always taken, which is obviously being Black in America, and especially in LA. It's almost rare if you don't have some kind of a record, being a minority, in this country. Okay, and I've always come this close to it, but You know, so I have a clean record, I always have, but coming this close just because of the nature of the situation that we live in here, you know, in America. So the alternative that I learned for myself was to go out and just create it myself, okay? Like with, you know, California Energy Advisors. Kind of even to answer part of your question that you were speaking about, you know, there's so much money being made in solar because of the demand for it, because of the need for it. A guy, woman, whomever, maybe who's just formally released, you know, from incarceration, can come out the next day, you know, be trained, of course, and go out and start selling solar, okay, and make the kind of money in, let's say, 1 month that most people make an entire year, okay, depending upon how passionate they are about it. So, and then they can use that same capital to really start their own business as well. Because that's what I've always done. I forgot the number of businesses I've started and have grown, and a couple that I've taken onto the stock market over the past 20-something years. But the main drive for it for me is, what is my individual potential? And how do I bring that out and help others do the same thing? So that's why forums like this are quite important, because not only is all the information now, you know, coming out there to as many people as we can share it with, but just like you know, you were saying, you know, if you start the work, the hope comes. You know, and that's the way that I intuitively have taken it. Just go out there, make causes, make actions, and then whatever it is that I'm aiming for does appear. And for me, it's how do I save the world, so to say, and the opportunity of solar opened up for me. And so now that I'm really trying to make it grow as much as possible for others as well as my clients.
All right, thank you so much for that, Mike. All right, so the next one is a kind of like a two-part question. I think we've talked a little bit about how much money can be made in solar and how important like solar panels and things are for wealth creation and things like that. But what are some other jobs within the industry, or even skills or professions in the industry that are adjacent maybe to solar, but not necessarily as labor intensive as going out there in a construction way? How can you get into this industry if you are older, or if you're not, you know, maybe handy capable, or I should say, yeah. Can you guys speak to something like that, and then I'll ask the second question afterwards.
The first thing, just build your resume, that's all. Just send over your resume. That's the main thing. Go online, look for companies, because there are many different solar companies that are hiring all day. That's at least getting their foot in the door. But as far as any ancillary, ancillary services, is what there are billions of them. So the panels.
Would you like to speak on that?
I'll start. Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is that it's not just like a solar job, or you know, urban, you know, like urban gardening, or you know, like this is we're literally switching our infrastructure and our way of life, you know, into a clean energy space, and we really have to look at what that means. That means people who used to be mechanics, you know,
so after this, run the ALC after this.
They're phasing out combustion engines. This is the first time this has happened since we figured out that gasoline could power cars. You know what I'm saying? Like we're really committed to making this transition to a clean energy space, and not because everybody wants to, but because it has to be done to save this planet. Like the planet's gonna live if it wipes us all out. It'll come back and renew itself, but we live, and I think that's what people understand. Like this transition has to happen, so that means we have to source out clean energy for everything, our lights, our vehicles, the way we eat. We have to get rid of, you know, what they call it, the commercial, the way we eat commercial foods, and you know, the
packaging and things like that.
Yeah, you know, like killing 10 million chickens a day that aren't even really chickens. They're really things grown in labs or in restaurants that we like. Everything fundamentally has to change. So all the jobs that exist are still going to exist. It's just that we're going to need to train people to be ready for all these things. You know, we're going to need, 10 years ago, you couldn't have told me that things like the little carts that they ride, the Uber carts, and
You know, the things that people, the scooters, you know, that's clean technology. 20, 30 years ago, skateboarding was seen as a thing that was, you know, for outliers. Now skateboarding is totally in. Electric skateboards, this is seen as a way of clean transportation. So you have clean transportation, you have, you know, you can look at clean water, you know, things that we've been doing forever already, recycling. Recycling is so big now, you know. So that all these industries, there's spin-offs and there's things we can do. In solar, if you don't want to be an installer, you can get site surveying and you can be able to go out and assess roofs and get it back to construction, you know, project management. You know, you can do inspections. So there's so many different types of jobs. You just see the installer because they're out on the roof. But there's a whole, you know, back office that it takes to make things work. So.
Thank you very much. Marcel, would you like to add to that?
I actually have a question for you guys. So what would be someone who wanted to start a solar company, like an entrepreneur, not on the ground level, entry level, but more of an owner? What would that take, and how much is that investment to get into that business?
Great question.
You take more of this one too. But the main thing there is really, the first thing would be obviously setting aside whatever capital it is that you're looking for. I mean, you're planning on using. The other thing, as far as, startup costs. So within the startup costs is also going to be like licensing, you know, getting your contractor's license, which isn't, you know, too much. It's a few months of study. But the main thing is this: is if you're looking at it more from a passive point of view, maybe considering, am I going to go in as a silent partner and have someone else do more of the active work, or do I really want to go in and devote the time and energy to be an active, you know, partner in this? Which means that's a whole new career that you're gonna have to sit down and learn.
Yeah, and I think it's what kind of solar company you want to start. You can start a residential solar company, or you can start a commercial solar company. Commercial is going to be more capital intensive because you're going to need really a full crew to do everything. You're going to need back office. You're going to need the whole financing mechanism set up. You're going to need, you know, several trucks. So it's going to be more that you need. I think if you were to start residential, I would say, you know, probably a couple $100,000, $200,000, maybe $300,000, and then access to financing. Because one of the biggest problems is when you find a client, they can't put up, you know, $20,000, $30,000 for a system, right? So it's better that they have somebody they can go to that's going to give them a loan, you know, at the right rate. Because if we go and get it at 25%, it doesn't make sense. But if you go to your credit union, you know, you're getting it at 3-4% like you would a vehicle, then it makes sense, you know.
And then actually, I mean, that's a perfect vehicle for you because you're already in finance. So if you were to focus on energy efficient financing, that's a whole new industry right there for you, which you just fall right into.
Yeah.
Without all the extreme, you know, you won't have to raise, you know, $200,000-300,000 to do that. Quite a bit less depending on how you want to grow it.
And I think that's to be successful. You can run a bare bones operation. You could just do solar sales and you can contract out all the installations. But if you want to be a full-on EPC, like engineering, procurement, and contracting, and have a sales arm, you know, then you need to be able to build out that staff capacity to run an effective organization. So I'll say about that much money plus access to capital.
Another question, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you guys get contracts with the government? Are there set asides for minorities or women to start these businesses, or to get contracts like with the city, state, or county? Is there like a set aside for these groups?
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to go about it. The city is definitely supportive of, you know, minority-owned, women-owned businesses. And, you know, there's processes you have to go through, but then you can competitively bid for those contracts. You can register as a social enterprise with the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles. This lets you be more competitive, and they have carve-outs for women and minority-owned businesses. So, but it's all there. I would love to have that conversation with you and talk about it more to figure some things out. Definitely, and I'd love to hear
Sir Billy?
about those jobs.
Yeah, so what we just experienced here is like the great example of the fourth industrial revolution that we're going into, right? Because it's green, but it's also orange. The orange economy is our creative economy. And our creative economy says not only are we creating new things, but we create new positions, we create new jobs, we create new structures in the way we do things. And so that's what you heard as the questions asked. It's like, well, yeah, you could do that, but you could also do this. You could also do this. These are the multiple ways of ownership. And some of us don't want to own right away. So here's ways to participate. And that's what I'm excited about in this time, in this moment, that we're green and orange and sharing the information. Safety. Have anybody ever seen the film A Need to Grow? Rosario Dawson is the narrator.
Oh, was that the one with the 60 harvest years left?
It's about this growth structure that they did in the Midwest somewhere. Powered, efficient, zero carbon, or even the who killed the electric car.
Oh, yes.
Oh, closer. Yeah. Thank you again for having this talk with YJC. What did I want to say about this group? Are listening to one another, right, and trusting one another. Because I have to talk to parents all the time about my kid's on the game, he's on the video game. I did an event with C2C, Cradle to Career STEM Innovation Network in San Antonio about STEM, right? And so where it's fun, you see it. But why would that be a military thing? Right? Because the same controlling that you do on the controls for this is how you control drones. They drop bombs. And who's the best at the science? Who has the most money for science, technology, engineering, and math? And so there's a way to direct our kids that way, but it's also in the sports, right? EA, it's in the sports, right? So they're playing the games, and you can then be a maker of those games. You make those games, that's STEM. Right now, colleges are giving college scholarships if you're on the game you play, because that's a new league. Those leagues make more than a lot of the terrestrial sports. So STEM, yeah, it is for solar, it is for economy, but the biggest one is our stories. Right now, as we celebrate George Floyd and a moment of silence for Ma'Khia Bryant, for young Toledo, a young 13-year-old that was killed, we are, still healing from this intergenerational trauma. And post, it's prolonged for us. And now the world experienced this prolonged trauma, so healthcare is going to be critical, particularly mental health care. And so that's why you see with the Department of Mental Health, a part of the Black Mental Health Task Force, that peer-to-peer, for people that are just coming back from incarceration, then you're the best one to be trained to help someone coming out of incarceration. For those that are just recovering from substance abuse or homelessness, they're the best to give that information. So there's going to be a lot of work in us helping each other heal, and that's about telling our stories. And so again, being in circles like this, encouraging parents to hear their kids and kids to hear their parents, and that's happening more now. Why? Because parents are like, if I don't listen to my kid, I can't be a part of this society, because they're the only ones that know this phone. And to the degree, right? But it helps us keep up with one another if they allow us to say, and you've been on it enough. But if that's what the crack generation did, it said we're going to give the money to the kids so that there'll be it'll break up inside. We've already done it through slavery, so now let's put it on the inside where the drug dealer is going to say the younger person won't get that much time, but then the younger person still won't listen to the parents, because they don't want to make the money. So, but we're breaking it all down, all of it, at the same time, because we're not doing it. Y'all work.
All right, thank you so much. So I have one more question before we wrap it up, and this again is going to be for the entire panel. Earlier, Adewale, you said something about pushing for Grid Africa. As we know, ACON has done a lot of clean energy initiatives in Africa and also here in America. But what I want to know from you guys is, when you reimagine a Black future, what are some other interesting models that can be implemented to transform our communities in a micro way and then also in a macro way? So if you all of you can speak to that before we close.
One that I would say would be this is transferring. You know how we're always talking about community gardens and shopping and growing locally? That would be one of the first things, because I know that in the cannabis industry, or hydroponics, where a lot of them could actually be using more energy efficient stuff like solar panels and all of that, but at the same time, those hydroponic centers could actually be indoor farms as well, creating our own food chain.
Beehives and stuff?
Exactly. Well, just all of it, because I mean, all of that, look at it this way, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about, the rise of mental illness. And I know there's a rise because I already have 3 of my sisters that in the past couple of years, affected by mental illness. And you have to think, what is it that we're putting in our body? What are we breathing in? Right now we're breathing in a lot of toxins and a lot of metals. Metals also breaks down the brain. So when you're breathing all that in all the time, you're going to see a rise in this. So I think that if we actually go more and focus on the energy efficient things indoors, growing our own food with our own communities in a hydroponic manner, that will also create the self-sufficiency and the profitability that we look for to recycle our dollars.
Thank you. I would like to speak to this, and then we'll move it around.
Yeah, we can go that way. That's a heavy question. I think that's a whole thing by itself. We could have a whole other round table. I always try to think from a Pan-African mindset. And though that I get the more I understand, like Pan-Africanism doesn't mean going back to Africa, but it means like Africa's here and Africa's here. You know what I'm saying? For lack of a better word, of what the true concept internally is of Africa. So I think first we have to get ourselves back, the way that we deal with mental health, you know what I'm saying, the way that we look at things, and we have to, my mother was a teacher, a professor, since I've been born pretty much, but she used to teach this class called Decolonizing Methodologies, you know what I'm saying, it's really to look at your mind and think like, when I look at something, am I using somebody else's framework when I think about things? And are we being critical of that? So how can we get back to who we are unless we've been critical of, when we talk about Carter G. Woodson, and how somebody can control a man's thinking. So we're doing things, but we're not really clear on where our reference or our frame point is at. And then once we understand ourselves, and I think we can come back together collectively in unity, and then understand these new technologies and these new things, and rebuild our systems, and that's looking at it from a macro level. And I think you see a lot of that right here in Leimert, at the micro level. It's like, here's community right here. We have our own clothing, our own, music and everything right here, you know what I'm saying? But how can we scale that? And it's not to be exclusionary at all, you know what I'm saying? But it's to have systems that also directly empower us, that we're in control of, to make sure we're moving our people forward, and then we can collaborate, with everybody else, because you can't sit at the table when you don't have anything to bring to the table, So once we get ourselves together, we can sit back down at the table. If we have financing in place, like somebody said earlier, like, where I can go to my friend, whoever down the street, and say, hey, I need $2 million to get this going. And you know what? I have a neighborhood bank that's going to do that for me, or a CDC that's going to do that for me. Then we can really begin to scale things like they should be scaled. And that means we're not fighting nobody. We're dealing with what we have to deal with, so.
Thank you.
That's a good answer. That is a heavy question. What I see that's needed in our community, and not because I'm in the field of finance, but I just see money just makes a lot of things better. Access to, it just changes your life. And money's not everything, but it does help a lot of situations. Like, instead of just trying to survive, you're kind of thrive when you have money, and you can think more clearly. You can really go after your goals differently instead of just trying to survive. So access to not just capital for a business, but just access a decent job. I've seen people who get an education and just their lives turn around because they have a great job that can pay the bills and they're not struggling anymore. Like, I went to a historically black college in Louisiana, Grand Prix State University, and we had people come from all around the world, well, all around the U.S. and the world. We had people from Africa attending Grambling, but they would come. Some people would say I lived in a 2-bedroom project with 14 brothers and sisters. They come to go to college, majored in engineering, and next thing you know, they have a nice house in Dallas in the suburbs. So just access to education and where it helps with it just helps your life overall. But access to these things, not just not having access, getting into college. Once you get into college, I mean, my college was predominantly black. Believe it or not, there were a large percentage of white students there that went to nursing school, but I feel like education just helps you take your life to the next level, and just having resources, access, and having to be able to get anything that you want and desire. It doesn't have to be $1 million. If you want to travel, if you want to buy a house, it shouldn't be such a hurdle, or it just shouldn't be so hard for people to have these resources. And that's what I feel like if we have access to, because I'm on both sides. I'm in the Valley and Woodland Hills, and I'm in LA, and I'm in Inglewood, and I just see the difference and the disparity between these communities. And it just it does bother me when I come to South LA and I see it looks like there's no resources here. And then I go to the Valley and we have everything new and modern, and all of these apartment buildings going up brand new, and I just see the difference in the roads and things like that. So I just feel like we need equality overall, and just access to all the resources that everybody else has access to.
Thank you. Councilor Gill.
Believe, and we will receive. Big up on the 20th, the city council provided reparations to the Bruce family. This multi-million-dollar property, multi-million beachfront property that was taken, And so we are, I think it was maybe the early part of 2019 that some of the top billionaires or the top Fortune 500 companies said to their stockholders, we can no longer let money or profit be our sole bottom line. We have to start considering other things, thinking about the environment. And so Brother Adelawu says, when we have what we need to have, what we get at the table, we're also being helped by, this virus, we're being helped by the world and natural things that people's tables are crumbling from the lies and the evil that have built those tables, right? And so other communities are recognizing, some swifter than others, that I need to ask for repentance. And with that, working together, there'll be reconciliation. And then we'll have restoration of our environments, And that's not going to be everybody, and how we receive, like I just wrap up with Nelson Mandela, right? And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission over there. There's a lot that went right. There's a lot that went wrong that's still like, man, this is why, we need to just take it. But peace, love, positivity, speaking about up talk, higher thoughts, and trying unity. That's a chorus from my son's record. I thought I would end right there, and this is clothesline, try unity, Strong Brave Yaya Music, StrongBraveYayaMusic.com. Thank you. So right before we leave, if everybody can just quickly say your name and where they could find find you, if they can email you or contact you for any additional resources or help. So Mike, maybe you want to start and we'll go back around.
Okay, so it's Michael Jones, info@cea.energy, and you can go to ceaenergy.co, that's the website, and that'll connect you to our Facebook, Instagram, and everything else as well.
Beautiful. Thank you for this conversation. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we have a workforce development program, and we run cohorts, paid training for 12 weeks. Every quarter we do it through different channels, but we have the funding in place. So anybody can reach out to me. I'll be glad to talk to you and let you know how you can get some job training with us, paid job training, not just for free. But yeah, my email is long, so I'll take my time. It's AOGUN, B as in boy, A, D as in David, E, J as in John, O, at gridalternatives.org. And if you don't see it there, you can actually go to the website, go to GridLA, GRIDLA.org, and you'll find me there. So thank you guys. It's been a great opportunity, and I love collaborative spaces because I learn, we all learn, and it helps us to connect because the only way you can do it is through partnership. So it's been a blessing. Thank you.
My name is Marcel Watts, and my email address is mwatts, MWATTS, at cdcloans.com. So that's mwatts at cdcloans.com. And just quickly, we do have a loan program that's targeting the LA, Lamar Park, Crenshaw District, the Pico District, and Inglewood. And it's for the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous people of color. It's up to $250,000, and interest rates are 6 to 8%. But we're targeting these businesses that may close due to COVID, and we have $8 million to deploy.
Sir James Bailey. You can find me at sir@youthjusticela.org or S Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y, B as in boy, A-I-L-E-Y, S Bailey at youthbuildcharter.org. Thank you guys, ladies.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you to our audience in real life and online. Please stay in contact with us at Soul Folks on all the platforms. We have some more events happening this weekend. This Saturday, we'll be continuing the energy and ecology and STEM conversation, along with more opportunities for employment and things like that for formerly incarcerated people this Saturday. And also some cool stuff, some panels and screenings happening on Sunday as well. So that's it. Thank you all so much again. I really appreciate you all, and good night.
So, can you maybe take 2 or 3
Thank
shots?
you, Addis.
Okay, you're all good.
That's really good.
Thank you, Mike.
Just take like 2 or 3 shots of us here.
Pictures? Okay. All right. And then if you guys have any questions for them, please now.